Hello, and welcome to the Paraeducator course. This is the third and final video in the series created to cover Standard 4, addressing emotional and behavioral concerns. As a reminder, my name is Ann Britt, and I have worked for Keystone in a variety of roles, including school social worker for the past 17 years. My co-presenter is Dee Blanchard. Dee is the Learning Supports Consultant for Keystone and has been employed at Keystone for the past 16 years. The purpose of this video series is to provide content in the area of Standard 4 of the Generalist online course, which is called Emotional and Behavioral. The content is provided by the Iowa Department of Education and meets the criteria they have set forth. Keystone has chosen to provide the content through 3 video sessions and 1 live Zoom session to be held in April. Our intended audience for the video series is paraeducators who are either getting their Paraeducator Generalist certification or getting recertification credit. I'd like to provide you with some general information. This is the third and final video in the video series. The final session will be a live Zoom session. You have the option to attend the live Zoom session on one of 2 days. They are Tuesday, April 12th, starting at 4 o'clock, or Thursday, April 14th, starting at 4:30. You may either attend in person at Keystone AEA in Elkader or attend remotely via a Zoom link. The Zoom link will be posted at a later date and can be found at Keystone's Paraeducator website under upcoming classes. As a review, I will provide some general information about how the video series is structured. The assignments will be in the form of journal activities. Each video series has journal activity slides that are denoted by a notebook icon in the upper left-hand corner. The journal activities are aligned with the content of each video series. For those of you who are taking the course for your Generalist certification, journal activities will be completed in the Moodle. Additional guidance will be provided for how to complete these on the Moodle site. If you are taking the course for recertification credit, in the past, the assignment has been a 1-page reflection paper. For this year's video series, the journal activities discussed in the videos will take the place of the reflection paper you may be used to writing. You should complete and record all of the journal activities on the journal activity form. This form can be found on the web page where you found this video. You can either type your answers into the form or print out the form and handwrite your answers. All videos must be watched and all journal activity forms completed and sent to Glenda Succo in the Owine field office by March 31st. You will receive an email stating your paper was received. Assignments can be sent to Glenda either electronically to the email address listed here, or hard copies can be sent to Glenda via van mail at the Owine field office, Route 7. Now we are ready to begin talking about Standard 4. To review, Standard 4 contains 7 different competencies. Each competency is addressed during the video series. With each competency, there are 3 to 6 objectives. This final video series, number 3, covers competencies 6 and 7. Standard 4 states the following. Under the supervision of a licensed education professional, the paraeducator will recognize that there is a cause or reason for misbehavior and assist in determining the cause or reason. Dee will now talk about Competency 6.
As Ann mentioned, in this video, we will be addressing Competency 6 and Competency 7 of Standard 4. Competency 6 states that the paraeducator will recognize, address, and report bullying behavior. The learning objectives for this competency are to understand what bullying is and what bullying is not, identify the types of bullying, describe what to do about bullying, and learn your school system's procedures for reporting bullying. The majority of the information shared in this video for Competency 6 is from the Olveus Bullying Prevention Program. Olveus is a whole school program that is designed to prevent and reduce bullying in the school setting. It has over 30 years of research and effective implementation around the world. I am a certified trainer for the program, and I am happy to be able to share a little of what I have learned with you. Before we can effectively respond to bullying, we need to consider attitudes and notions we might harbor about who is involved, what bullying is and what it looks like, when and where it may occur, how it affects us, and why it continues. Take a moment and think about the questions above. You may pause the video while you consider how you would answer each question. Societal attitudes and misconceptions about bullying surround us and play a role in how we view bullying and in how or even whether we respond. On the next slide, read each of the statements and decide if it is a myth or a fact. You may pause the video while you consider each statement. Children who bully are rejected by their peers and have no friends. This is a myth. Research indicates children who bully are not socially isolated. They have an easier time making friends and are less socially anxious or lonely than their peers. They are average or somewhat below average in popularity among peers, but have at least a small group of friends who support their bullying behavior. Some children who bully may even be popular among classmates who perceive them as cool and admire their power. Number 2, children who bully have low self-esteem. This is a myth. This myth has its roots in the widely accepted view that people who bully others must act that way because they think poorly of themselves. In fact, children who bully have average or above average self-esteem. They perceive themselves in a positive light, perhaps even displaying inflated self-views. Number 3, being a target of bullying builds character. This is a myth. Research findings clearly show that being bullied increases the vulnerabilities of these children, quite contrary to building character. Number 4, many children who are targets of bullying become violent as teens. This is also a myth. The portrayal of bullying victims lashing out in anger at their tormentors in school shooting incidents has been reinforced by the media over the past few years. However, most victims of bullying are more likely to suffer in silence than to retaliate. Many victims experience psychological adjustment problems like depression and low self-esteem that encourage them to turn their anger inward rather than outward. And number 5, bullying involves only perpetrators and targets. This is a myth. As we will discuss further, bullying involves more than the perpetrators and targets of the incident. Studies based on playground observations found that in 75% of bullying incidents, at least 4 other peers were present as bystanders, either reinforcing or discouraging the bullying. One study found that in more than 50% of observed incidents of bullying, peers reinforced the bullying by passively watching. In only about 25% of the incidents did witnesses support the target of the bullying. So it's important to begin with a common understanding of what bullying is and what it isn't. This is how bullying is defined in the Olveus program. Bullying is when someone repeatedly and on purpose says or does mean or hurtful things to another person who has a hard time defending himself or herself. We want to be careful to avoid using the terms bully and victim as much as possible when describing students. We want to avoid labels and focus on the behavior. So we always encourage this practice with all staff in schools. Bullying is characterized by three key components. First of all, bullying is a form of aggression. The behavior is often repeated, though adults often are not aware of patterns until a serious event occurs. But you do not want to wait for a pattern before responding. You need to address all negative behavior immediately. And number three, unlike other forms of aggression, there is an imbalance of power or strength between the child who is bullying and the child who is being bullied. This imbalance of power can be physical, but often is emotional or verbal and can be quite subtle. Think of some other examples of an imbalance of power. There could be power in numbers. One child may be older or more sophisticated than another, or they may have more social status or higher socioeconomic status. There are many ways that someone could exert power over another person. The result then is that the child who is being bullied is likely to have a difficult time defending himself or herself physically, verbally, emotionally, etc. Bullying is a form of victimization or peer abuse and shares some characteristics like being repetitive and an imbalance of power with other forms of victimization like domestic violence and child maltreatment. Remember that bullying isn't a form of conflict, which implies two parties who are on more or less equal footing. Responding to bullying as if it were a conflict can be damaging, as it may send inappropriate messages to the children involved or re-victimize the child who was bullied. Adults are most familiar with direct bullying and are most apt to respond to it. Examples can be physical, like hitting, or verbal, like name-calling. But bullying can be more subtle or indirect in nature. Examples include social-emotional bullying, like gossip or spreading rumors. Exclusion is also a more subtle form of bullying. Cyberbullying is a relatively new frontier for bullying and is particularly difficult for schools to discover and address. Relational bullying, which is sometimes called relational aggression or social cruelty, can be indirect or direct and can combine direct and indirect forms of bullying. For your first journal activity, match each scenario with the type of bullying behavior. Pause the video now to complete this journal activity. Behaviors like rough and tumble play and real fighting are often confused with bullying. That's a problem, as we don't want to respond to all behavior in the same way. Rough and tumble play is when two or more students hit, push, chase, wrestle in a friendly, playful manner. Real fighting is usually direct in nature, either physical or verbal, and usually involves a single negative altercation. Download the handout Similarities and Differences Between Rough and Tumble Play, Real Fighting, and Bullying from the accompanying resources section of the website where you accessed this video. The handout describes some of the ways that you can distinguish between the different types of behavior. For instance, rough and tumble play differs from bullying in the relationship between the parties and the expression and atmosphere. Many times the kids involved are friends and the expression and atmosphere is friendly and generally positive. unless someone takes it too far. Real fighting differs from bullying in the repeated nature of behavior and imbalance of power. Fighting is generally not repeated, and the parties are usually on equal footing in terms of power. Characteristics that help us sort out physical behaviors may also help us sort out more subtle forms of bullying, such as verbal joking from bullying. For your next journal activity, read the handout that we just reviewed. Then, for each of the scenarios on the following 2 slides, decide if it is rough and tumble play, fighting, or bullying. Write your answer down and explain the reason for your choice. If you are not sure, write down what additional information you might need to know in order to clarify the situation and determine if it is a form of conflict or a bullying incident. There are scenarios listed on the next 2 slides, so you may want to pause the video between the slides. In the next few slides, we will be discussing risk factors and effects on children who are involved in bullying incidents. Bullied children usually have one or more of the characteristics listed on this slide. Some characteristics may be seen as both contributing factors or causes and consequences of the victimization. For instance, if a child feels insecure, his or her behavior may signal them as an easy target for bullying. While that insecurity may contribute to him or her being singled out for abuse, regular bullying is also likely to shake their confidence further. So the insecurity may be both a cause and a consequence of the bullying. In noting this, however, we need to be careful not to blame the victim of the bullying. No child deserves to be bullied, and bullied children are not responsible for the bullying. Bullying may seriously affect psychosocial functioning, academic work, or the health of children who are targeted. These effects can be both short and long-term. Being bullied is related to lower self-esteem, higher rates of depression, loneliness, and anxiety. Bullied children are more likely to report wanting to avoid school and have higher absenteeism rates. They report disliking school and receive lower grades. Bullied children report more suicidal ideation than non-bullied peers. Though relatively rare, suicide has been linked to persistent bullying. Suicidal ideation and depression appear more common among children experiencing indirect bullying, like exclusion or being ignored, than with direct bullying. And depression and low self-esteem can persist into adulthood. In a longitudinal study of 380 kindergarten through 5th graders, researchers found that early peer rejection in kindergarten is associated with peer exclusion and peer abuse by the time the students are in 5th grade. Peer exclusion leads to a decrease in classroom participation, which in turn leads to a decrease in achievement as measured by a standardized achievement test. Peer abuse leads to an increase in school avoidance, although this is not directly related to achievement. Children who are frequently bullied also report a variety of health problems. In a 2004 study of Dutch school children ages 9 through 12, they found that bullied children were more likely than peers to experience a variety of physical ailments. They were 3 times as likely as peers to have headaches, 2 times as likely to have problems sleeping, abdominal pain, and to be tense. They were 3 times as likely to be anxious, and 5 times as likely to be unhappy and much more depressed. Some children are at particularly high risk of being bullied because of ways they are perceived as being different. Sometimes these differences might be viewed as positive, for instance, gifted or talented. Sometimes these differences may be viewed as negative, such as those shown on this slide. These include physical, cognitive, learning, or behavioral disabilities, including ADHD and autism. Special health care needs or medical conditions that affect their appearance, or medical conditions such as diabetes, stuttering, and obesity. Students who are LGBT or are perceived to be LGBT are at higher risk of being bullied. Although there is no single profile of children who bully tend to have positive attitudes toward violence, be impulsive and have quick tempers, show little empathy for bullied students, be aggressive to adults, be involved in other antisocial or rule-breaking activities, and for boys, tend to be physically stronger than their peers. Not all students who bully have obvious behavior problems or are engaged in antisocial activities besides bullying. Some are very skilled socially with teachers and other adults. For instance, they can talk themselves out of sticky situations. So it can be difficult for adults to discover or even imagine that some of these children are bullying others. Anyone can misuse their power to harm others. Even though we listed some common characteristics of youth who bully, there really isn't, again, a consistent profile. Popular and talented students, those popular with adults as well, may also bully others. Unfortunately, many media reports detail bullying behaviors from sports team leaders, cheerleaders, or those in popular groups who have abused their power. Classmates tend to rate children who bully higher in social status, and their teachers confirm that they are often among the most popular in class. Sometimes adults unwittingly lend support and additional power to students perceived as leaders who may be harming other students. Adults should not be quick to dismiss reports of bullying behavior by anyone. All reports should be investigated. Take a minute to think about the two questions on this slide. Why do children bully? Some motives for bullying are listed on this slide. Many have a strong need for dominance and power. They like to be in control and subdue others. Some find satisfaction in causing injury and suffering. Or they may get material or psychological rewards for their behavior. There is reason to be concerned about children who bully their peers. Researchers have found bullying behavior to be related to other antisocial, violent, or troubling behaviors. They are more likely than their non-bullying peers to get into frequent fights, be injured in a fight, steal or vandalize property, drink alcohol or smoke, be truant or drop out of school, report poor academic achievement, perceive a negative climate at school, or carry a weapon. Bullying may be a collection of gateway behaviors that, if not stopped, could become illegal antisocial behaviors in adulthood. Frequent or persistent bullying behavior is commonly considered to be part of a conduct disordered behavior pattern. This pattern may continue into young adulthood if not checked. A longitudinal study conducted in Norway found that 60% of boys who were identified as bullying others in middle school had at least one conviction by the age of 24. 35 to 40% had 3 or more convictions. Those who bullied were 3 to 4 times as likely as non-bullying peers to have multiple convictions by their early 20s. This study only included boys, but similar patterns may hold true for girls. Most research shows that approximately 10 to 20% of bullied students may also bully others. These students display social-emotional problems similar to the victimized students. They may be depressed, socially anxious or isolated, feel disliked by peers, and have poor self-esteem. Or they may show behavioral problems similar to students who bully. Aggressive antisocial behavior, difficulty concentrating, impulsive or hyperactive. These students may try to bully weaker students, but are less effective than other children who bully. Their behavior may cause great irritation and tension in peers and adults alike. This results in considerable negative attention, but there's no evidence that they want to provoke others or be bullied. We've discussed how bullying affects children who are bullied and concerns for children who bully. Why else be concerned? One other compelling reason is the effect that bullying may have on bystanders or witnesses to bullying, who make up a much larger proportion of students in a school. Children who observe bullying going on around them may feel afraid or powerless to change the situation. They may feel guilty for not acting or responding in a way they felt they should. And there may be diminished empathy for the bullied students over time. Reduced empathy can result in bystanders joining in or siding with children who bully rather than intervening to help or support the bullied students. Peer group or bystanders play an important role in motivating and encouraging bullying in many situations. This graphic that we call the bullying circle illustrates the roles that students play in bullying situations. As this continuum shows, students who bully often get various types of support from followers, supporters, and passive supporters. Roles vary among participants and observers. Some are much more active than others. They are also dynamic in that a student may assume different roles depending upon the situation and the people involved. The goal is to shift behavior and attitudes within the school so that it becomes the norm to discourage bullying and defend those who are bullied, and reduce the power of the students who bully. Watch this video of a bullying incident. Use the bullying circle to identify the different roles that you see students taking. Jot some of them down.
Look at his shoes, dude. That means enough space. Dude, I told you. Fight it!
In 2007, Iowa adopted a new law that requires school districts to have anti-bullying, anti-harassment policies. The policy must include a statement declaring bullying and harassment involving employees, volunteers, and students to be against state and school policy. It must include a definition of bullying and harassment, describe expected behavior, describe consequences for violating the behavior, and procedures for reporting and investigating incidents of bullying. These policies must align with state anti-bullying laws. If bullying disrupts the learning environment, then schools must address it. Your next journal activity is to access and read your school district's anti-bullying harassment policy. Write a paragraph about what behavior is expected of a paraeducator in complying with the policy. Pause the video now to complete this journal activity. Because students who are bullied have a difficult time defending themselves, it is critical that adults intervene in bullying situations. But before we talk about how best to intervene, we need to talk about why adults don't always intervene. Research says adults overestimate their effectiveness. 70% of teachers believed they intervene almost always, while only 25% of students agreed. Here are some of the reasons adults don't intervene. They may have difficulty recognizing bullying versus kidding around. They might not recognize the importance of intervening. They might feel it's just a part of growing up or that kids need to learn to deal with it on their own. They may not be sure how to intervene without making the situation worse. Or they may only have a minute or two to address the situation. Without training, many adults simply ignore it, may yell at the student, may try to get to the bottom of it right then by lecturing the student. They might ignore the victimized student or embarrass them, and they might send the bystanders away. It's important to learn a consistent, appropriate way to intervene in bullying situations. All adults in a school should be prepared to address bullying they witness. The on-the-spot intervention can be used in situations when an adult sees or hears the bullying. Download the handout On-the-Spot Interventions, Detailed Step-by-Step Instructions from the accompanying resources section of the website where you accessed this video. Pause the video now to read this handout. In this short video clip, you will see several brief scenarios of a girl attending a new school being bullied. You will be using this video clip to complete the journal activity on the following slide.
Let's see. How was my first day? Sorry. What are you apologizing for? Your clumsiness or your sorry outfit? All the empty seats here are taken. Now that's what I call accessorizing.
Girls, what's going on here?
Nothing, Mr. Bittner. How was my first day? My first day was great. Just great.
For your next journal activity, choose one of the brief bullying scenarios in the video clip that you just saw. Use the handout On-the-Spot Interventions, detailed step-by-step instructions from slide 44 as a guide to write a script about what you would say if you were the staff member who saw the incident and needed to intervene. Write 1 to 2 sentences for each step as if you were talking directly to the student or students. Pause the video now to complete this journal activity. Adults don't always witness bullying firsthand and must learn what to do if they suspect it. You may suspect bullying if a student is spending time alone during lunch or recess, acting anxious or depressed, or if you overhear students talking about it, or if there's a noticeable change in the student's behavior. When you suspect but don't witness bullying, intensify your observations of the child. Talk with your colleagues. You may want to talk with the student or with other students and report your suspicions to your administrator or to your partner teacher. Suspicions always deserve follow-up action by adults. Here are some things you can do to help prevent and respond to bullying incidents. Build a positive relationship with your students. This will help them know they have a caring adult in their lives who will listen and try to help. A student who is being bullied often suffers in silence, but will be more likely to tell an adult they like and trust. Move and scan when you are supervising. Use this opportunity to build relationships and be diligent observers of hurtful behavior. Be active listeners. Intervene immediately. Practice the on-the-spot steps so that you can intervene consistently and calmly. Report the bullying to a teacher and/or the principal. The bullying will likely not stop without the help of adults. Follow up in a few days. Check in with the student to see how it is going. Download the handout, Paraeducators and Student-to-Student Bullying, from the accompanying resources section of the website where you accessed this video. The handout outlines the results of a nationwide survey conducted by the National Education Association to get the opinions of educational support professionals and teachers on issues relating to bullying in public schools. Almost 1,000 of the respondents were paraeducators. Presented in the article are highlights of the survey along with tips for preventing and intervening. You will need this article to complete the journal activity on the next slide. Read the article, Paraeducators and Student-to-Student Bullying. Do you agree or disagree with the results of the NEA survey as it relates to what paraeducators said? Why or why not? Write down a few of your thoughts on your journal. Pause the video now to complete this journal activity. Here is a list of some excellent resources on bullying. Our own Keystone Media Collection has many resources that can be checked out with your teacher number. The websites contain some great information for educators, parents, and children. Here is a summary of the required journal activities for Competency 6. The slide numbers to refer back to for more specific directions for the activities are also listed.
Thanks, Dee. Moving on to Competency 7, it states the following. Recognize and report atypical emotional behavior. There is one learning objective for Competency 7. It is learn how to identify behaviors associated with depression, mood disorders, bipolar, self-injury, and suicidal behavior. As we begin to talk about atypical or unusual emotional behavior, there are some important ideas to remember. First of all school staff, including paraprofessionals, are mandatory reporters. Mandatory reporting guidelines can also include reports of suicidal or self-harming behaviors that students may exhibit. So, if a student indicates to you that they are having thoughts of suicide or that they have done things that are harmful to themselves, you need to let someone know. If you aren't sure who to tell, I recommend talking with the guidance counselor at your school or your principal. They can point you in the right direction of who to contact. The second important idea to remember is that as a paraeducator, you are not expected to diagnose or provide counseling to students. But being aware of different mental health concerns is important so you can help them get the help they need. As a way to set the framework for the different mental health concerns, I would like to start by providing a definition of mental health. Mental health can be defined as effective functioning in daily activities, resulting in productive activities at work, at school, and in caregiving, healthy relationships, and the ability to adapt to change and cope with adversity. Good mental health is also the foundation for thinking, communication, learning, resilience, and self-esteem. And mental health is key to relationships, personal and emotional well-being, and contributing to a community or society. When a person has good mental health, their ability to cope with the stressors of daily life is intact. Those with good mental health are able to roll with the punches much easier. Mental illness can have a significant impact on a person's mental health. Let's look deeper into mental illness in general before we look at specific mental illnesses. The term mental illness refers collectively to all diagnosable mental disorders or health conditions. Mental illness causes significant changes in thinking, emotions, or behavior, as well as distress or problems functioning in school, work, or family activities. Mental illness is a health condition involving changes in thinking, emotion, behavior, or a combination of these, and can be associated with distress or problems functioning in social, work, or family activities. There aren't clear causes for mental illness. However, medical professionals believe that possible causes include genetics, a chemical imbalance in the brain, traumatic life events, and the environment in which a person lives. As professionals working with and getting to know individual students well, you are in a perfect position to notice early warning signs. Some early warning signs of mental illness include withdrawal, recent social withdrawal and loss of interest in others, a drop in functioning, an unusual drop in functioning at school, work, or in social activities, such as quitting sports, failing in school, or difficulty performing familiar tasks. Problems in thinking is another early warning sign. Problems with concentration, memory, or logical thought and speech that are hard to explain. An increased sensitivity or heightened sensitivity to sights, sounds, smells, or touch, or avoidance of overstimulating situations can also be a warning sign. Apathy, defined as a loss of initiative or desire to participate in activities, can be a warning sign of mental illness. Additional warning signs include feeling disconnected, a vague feeling of being disconnected from oneself or one's surroundings, a sense of unreality, illogical thinking, unusual or exaggerated beliefs about personal powers, illogical or magical thinking typical of childhood in an adult. Being nervous, fear or suspiciousness of others, or a strong nervous feeling. Unusual behavior, which can be odd or uncharacteristic behavior in a person. You may notice sleep or appetite changes, dramatic sleep and appetite changes, or a decline in personal care. Somebody may at one time really care about how they look and they're always well kept, and then you see them later on and maybe their clothes aren't clean or their personal hygiene isn't good. That would be a change in personal care. Another warning sign is mood changes, rapid or dramatic shifts in feelings. If you notice any of these warning signs in a student, it can be really scary, but there are ways you can help. The website psychiatry.org recommends the following ways to help. Family involvement is crucial. They are valued partners and should be involved whenever possible. In the situation of students, family notification is required. The majority of the students in public school settings are under the age of 18, which means the school is obligated to inform parents about any concerns they might have. Second, learning about mental illness and what is happening in the brain can help individuals and families understand the significance of the symptoms, how an illness might develop, and what can be done to help. Just as with other medical illnesses, early intervention can make a crucial difference in preventing what could become a serious illness. Additional ways to help include encouraging the person or family to have an evaluation by a mental health or other healthcare professional, to learn about mental illness, including signs and symptoms, receive supportive counseling about daily life and strategies for stress management, and being monitored closely for conditions requiring more intensive care. Now that a broad overview of mental health and mental illness has been provided, we're going to look at a number of specific mental illnesses that are considered atypical or unusual behavior. We will first begin with mood disorders. What are mood disorders? The term mood disorder is a broad category that includes depression, bipolar disorder, and anxiety. We're going to start looking at mood disorders by talking about depression in children and adolescents. Depression, also known as major depressive disorder, is a common and serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. Depression causes feelings of sadness and/or a loss of interest in activities once enjoyed by a person. And depression can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems and can decrease a person's ability to function at work and home. Adolescent depression sometimes looks a little different. Adolescent depression is not medically different from adult depression. However, symptoms in teens may manifest in different ways than they do in adults, usually because of the different social and developmental challenges that are facing teens. Symptoms of adolescent depression include appearing sad, irritable, or tearful. May include changes in appetite or weight. You may notice a decreased interest in activities once found pleasurable. Oftentimes there is a decrease in energy and difficulty in concentrating as well. Additional symptoms of adolescent depression can include feelings of guilt, worthlessness, or helplessness, major changes in sleeping habits, regular complaints of boredom, even talk of suicide, withdrawal from friends of after-school activities, or worsening school performance. Next, I'd like to show a short 5-minute video on the top 5 myths of teenage or adolescent depression.
Not that long ago, doctors thought depression couldn't even happen to teens. And if they exhibited any signs of depression, they were simply dismissed as being moody and irritable. But as many teens, and used to be teens like myself, can attest, depression in your younger years is a very real thing. The first thing you should know about teen depression is that it's probably more common than you think. Teenage depression is a mental and emotional disorder that leads to symptoms such as prolonged sadness, loss of interest in activities, lowered self-worth, and feelings of discouragement. According to the National Institutes of Health, rates of adolescent depression peak around age 16. By 18, around 11% of kids have been diagnosed with clinical depression. Just to put it in even more perspective, 1 in 5 kids in the U.S. has experienced at least one bout of depression. Fact number 2, teenage girls are twice as likely to experience depression. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, between ages 12 and 15, depression rates triple among girls. Doctors still aren't entirely sure what's to blame for such a steep increase, but it probably has to do with a mix of hormonal changes brought on by puberty as well as peer pressure. And speaking of at-risk populations for teenage depression, LGBT youth are twice as likely to experience depression compared to straight teens and are 3 times as likely to have a history of suicidality. Bullying is often cited as a primary cause of that escalated rate of depression among lesbian, gay, transgender, and bisexual teenagers. A 2013 study found that 14% of 8th graders were bullied in school for either being gay or being suspected of being gay. What's even more alarming is that a 2009 study from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found that out of 7,000 LGBT middle and high school students, 8 out of 10 were verbally harassed by classmates, and 4 out of 10 were physically harassed. Whether we're talking about boys, girls, gay, straight, transgender, what's important for parents and teachers to recognize in particular is that teenage depression can look a bit different than adult depression. Specifically, hallmarks of teenage depression include things like irritability as opposed to outright sadness, or complaints of physical aches and pains, as well as extreme sensitivity to criticism, particularly for teens who tend to be overachievers, as well as social withdrawal, but not complete social isolation. If you or someone you know is a teenager battling depression, the 5th and perhaps most important fact to know is that it can get better. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or talk therapy, sometimes paired with antidepressant medication, is the typical professional treatment for prolonged bouts of depression in teenagers. If those kinds of resources aren't accessible for you, even just talking about it to a friend or family member can help alleviate those initial symptoms of depression. A recent study among high schoolers found that even just understanding and believing that life can change and get better has an insulating effect from depression during those crucial teen years. While that might sound like a naively optimistic mantra to cling on to, I can tell you from personal experience, from being a used-to-be depressed teenager, that yes, life can change and for the better. And also, all of that cheesy stuff about exercising and treating your body right and eating well and feeding your creativity and talking to people about what's going on inside of your head, yeah, all of that stuff makes a huge difference too, and that kind of stuff, I've only figured that out in the past few years. As far as that talking to people goes, if you need an ear, I'm here. I didn't mean to make that rhyme. You can always message me, you can email me, you can tweet me, you can Facebook me. In the meantime, be good to yourself, and be good to others too.
Next, we'll talk about bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is a mood disorder that is identified by extreme changes in mood, thought, energy, and behavior. These changes in mood are often called manic episodes and depressive episodes. A hallmark of bipolar disorder is the cycling between mania and depression. Symptoms of bipolar disorder are categorized into mania symptoms and depressive symptoms. Mania symptoms include heightened mood, exaggerated optimism and self-confidence, excessive irritability and aggressive behavior, a decreased need for sleep without experiencing fatigue, and grandiose thoughts and an inflated sense of self-importance. Additional mania symptoms include racing speech, racing thoughts, and flight of ideas, impulsiveness, poor judgment, and being easily distracted, reckless behavior, and in the most severe cases, delusions and hallucinations. Depressive symptoms of bipolar disorder include prolonged sadness or unexplained crying spells, significant changes in appetite and sleep patterns, irritability, anger, worry, agitation, and anxiety, pessimism or indifference, and loss of energy or persistence lethargy. Depressive symptoms also include feelings of guilt or worthlessness, an inability to concentrate or indecisiveness, an inability to take pleasure in former interests or social withdrawal, unexplained aches and pains, and recurring thoughts of death or suicide. The last two mental health concerns that we will discuss are self-injury and suicidal behavior. Both self-injurious behavior and suicidal behavior can be very frightening and scary to the people around the person who is either engaging in self-harm or talking about suicide. Of most importance is if you have concerns about either self-injury or suicidal behavior, is to make sure you share that information with school personnel so that you can come up with a plan to talk with the student and their family about the concerning behavior and to get them the help that they need. Self-injury is the act of someone intentionally and repeatedly harming himself or herself. It can also be referred to as cutting, self-harm, or self-mutilation. Self-injury can include cutting, burning, punching, or drinking something harmful like bleach or detergent. Some symptoms or warning signs of self-injury include unexplained frequent injury, including cuts and burns, wearing long pants and sleeves in warm weather. This is to hide evident cut marks on arms or legs. Low self-esteem, difficulty handling feelings. Another warning sign can be relationship problems and poor functioning at work, school, or home. Self-injury is a little different than what the disorders we've discussed previously. It's not considered a mental illness in and of itself. Rather, it's more of a symptom of a variety of mental illnesses, including some that we've discussed earlier: bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety disorders, personality disorders, or schizophrenia. The last mental health concern that we will discuss in this video series is suicidal behavior. Suicide can be defined as the act of a person taking their own life. There are many different warning signs for suicide. One may be if a person or a student actually is talking about wanting to die or kill themselves. They may also look for a way to kill themselves, such as searching online or buying a gun. They may talk about feeling hopeless or having no reason to live. They may also talk about feeling trapped or in unbearable pain. They may feel as though they're a burden to others, and there may also be an increase in alcohol or drug use. Additional suicidal warning signs are a person acting anxious or agitated, behaving recklessly. They may be sleeping too little or too much. They may withdraw or feel isolated. They also may show rage or talk about seeking revenge, as well as displaying extreme mood swings. Anytime you have a concern that a student may be considering or contemplating suicide, it is important to share that information with other school personnel and the parents of the student. Thankfully, there are many resources available to families and students who may be considering suicide. There's a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's a 1-800 number, and people are available to talk 24/7, so it's always available. They also have a really good website, suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Many of the resources and information that were shared in this video are from the suicidepreventionlifeline.org website. As we end our video series about Competency 7, recognizing and reporting atypical behavior, I would like to end with a video that's about 12 minutes long. It's about a young man who attempted suicide, and he shares his story about what led up to the suicide attempt and how he was able to move on after that and have a very successful life.
When I was 16, I was a sophomore in high school. That was the year that I was diagnosed with depression, which was a little strange to me.
We look back on Jordan being diagnosed with depression, we would have never thought that. And especially with me being in high school and working with high school students, I feel he was going through the regular adolescent things, starting to sleep in a little bit more, starting not to do all his homework, wanting to stay up late at night. Go, JV! Go, JV!
I was a popular student. I was one that was always smiling, always laughing. If you saw me in a hallway, you would think that's the last person in the world to have depression. So it was confusing to me to be diagnosed and have those emotions when it seemed as though I had everything that I wanted. A girlfriend, playing sports, popular, but still it felt like there was still a hole inside of me and I couldn't figure out why I had a lack of motivation to get out of bed, why I was randomly crying. So when I was 16, I was going to school with a mask on my face, acting and pretending as though I was really happy with the things that were going on around me.
When Jordan was first diagnosed, we really didn't realize what was wrong. And I think from my perspective that I sort of understood that with depression, it sort of gave answers to some things where I think it took time for Earl to really understand that these were the things that were going on and why he was behaving in the way that he was. And for Jordan, I think it was hard at first. He didn't like in therapy, didn't talk a lot at first to the counselor. Then he began to become a little bit better with it, with talking to her. But when I look back on it now, I don't know really at that point that he really even accepted the fact that he was depressed.
So the way I handled it was that I saw the therapist twice a week. I wasn't very talkative. I was probably 80% honest. The one thing that I definitely wasn't honest about was drinking, as well as taking my medicine. Even though my therapist reminded me 1,000 times that whatever is said in this room stays in this room, I figured I definitely shouldn't tell her that I was drinking and coping with things in a negative way. And when it came to my medicine, I made a mistake that a lot of young adults and teenagers make, is that they take the medicine for a couple weeks, even maybe a month, and they start to feel great. And they figured, well, I'm cured, I'm good to go, and they don't deal with it again, and they stop taking their medicine. With my suicide attempt, there were so many things that were built up and were the foundation of these thoughts of not wanting to be here, to not wanting to be on this earth, wanting to try and take my own life. And I think one of the biggest things was the pressure of being a junior and senior in high school. Is you start to realize that this is when you have to start taking life seriously. Because I wasn't taking my depression very seriously, so when I only had a C in a class, that's when I started to break down. That's when I started to shut down, and I felt like a failure. And the failure was one of the main reasons why I wanted to try and take my own life, because I figure if I'm not successful, if I'm not as good as my parents think I should be, if I disappoint my parents or make them upset, what is the point on being on this earth? There were also social issues. I'm an African American in a predominantly white school. I felt a lot of pressure when I'm the only black student in my classroom, and I felt like there was pressure on me to always have A's, to always try and fit in, when at the end of the day, it didn't matter if I was class president, if I was on the sports teams, if I was popular, I still felt like I really didn't fit in. And the other thing was getting caught drinking by my parents. When I got caught drinking, I felt like the failure of the family, simply because no one in my immediate family drinks. And so because of that, I felt like the black sheep. I felt like the scapegoat. When I had these suicidal thoughts, I didn't know how to talk to anyone, because I figured I was the only one who had those thoughts and emotions. And if I told someone, I just figured that the automatic reaction would be I had to go to a psych ward. Now, I did go to a mental hospital during my junior year after I had a breakdown, and I put pills on my desk and I threatened to take them. The funny thing is that when I was in that mental hospital, there were things that I told complete strangers because I knew that they understood where I was coming from. And I couldn't say that to my therapist. I couldn't say that to my parents. I couldn't say that to friends, because they didn't truly understand the real Jordan that hated himself, wondered every day whether I should be here or not. The day of my suicide attempt, I woke up just like any other day. And even though at that point I did have depressed feelings, I had depressed thoughts, there were days that I could wake up and forget about them. And that was definitely one of those mornings. And that's when my dad walked in with a duffel bag full of alcohol that I had in the trunk of my car. Now, when he dropped that bag, my heart dropped with it, saying to myself, I disappointed my parents yet again, as their son. Someone that should be making them happy, making them proud. All I do is upset them. So what's the point on being here? My dad confronted me about the alcohol. He didn't yell, he didn't scream, but it didn't matter, because everything was just numb to me at this point. And although my parents were very honest in that conversation, were very nice in that conversation, that was when I went to my room, like I usually do, whenever I'm upset or had a conversation with my parents. This time was a little different, though. When she knocked the first time, I said, "No, Mom." And then she knocked again, but by that time, I was actually out of my 9th-story window. It was impulsive. I didn't plan it that day. I didn't know that it would happen. That night, I was flown to the hospital and given 48 hours to live, and then a 40% chance to live after that. And after being in a coma for 5 days, I started to come to. After, my suicide attempt, I still wanted to see a therapist. I still wanted to see a psychiatrist, because I still wanted to take medicine and make sure that emotionally and mentally that I was still stable. Even though I knew I wasn't going to beat depression, I knew that I could cope with depression in a better way. Now, one change I did make was having a psychiatrist who did both the therapy and talking part and also administered the medicine. And I think that's something that really helped me out. I think that's something I really benefited from. I knew that 9 stories, it was a miracle that I was alive. So I appreciated being alive. I didn't fall into a bigger miss of depression. I didn't fall into a bigger miss of suicidal thoughts. I just felt as though I felt fortunate to be here. I knew that I had a second chance at life. Now, what I was going to do with that second chance, I had no idea. But I knew that I was going to make it a positive one. I would be lying to you if I said that I was laying in that hospital bed and I couldn't move, I couldn't talk, and I always had a positive attitude. But one thing I always thought was that I have to be at peace with the things that I can't control at this point. And that's something that I really held on to in my time in the hospital, is that I don't know when I'll be able to get out of a hospital bed. I don't know if I ever will. If I'll ever get into a wheelchair. If I'll ever be able to get out of a wheelchair. If I'll ever walk again. But I just wanted to be content with how my life was and try to help other people so that it didn't get to that point for someone else. Because I never want anyone else to go through the 5 months and the grueling pain and frustration that I did after my suicide attempt. So that was probably my main motivation to get healthy and to take my depression more seriously, is to not only make myself better emotionally and mentally, but also get myself to that point so that I can help other people out as well. With my depression, it's very important to have a healthy emotional balance, and the best way to find that is to know yourself, to realize who you are as a person and what really makes you happy. And that includes, for me, going out with friends, watching movies with my girlfriend, being able to hang out with my parents, to be able to be around people. I'm a people person, so I love being around people. Working out is huge. I love being able to work out, to physically still get better. Even though I'm able to walk, I still have a long way to go to physically be where I want to. It's very therapeutic to be able to tell my story, knowing that it's helping someone else and knowing that I'm making a difference and adding a positive light to society, which is something I never thought I would do before.
Really drew even closer, if that could be possible. But I think a big part of this was Jordan really, again, accepting that he did have a mental health problem.
I have the same depression that I had before, but the way that I cope and deal with it is in a much positive way than I did before. I don't have thoughts of wanting to try and take my own life. Do I question, how am I going to get through this day? Why am I here? Yeah, I definitely have thoughts of that. But what I do with those thoughts is different. And I think that's what's the main difference, is the coping abilities that I have now and the honesty that I have in being able to verbalize my thoughts and emotions with my depression. We're all going through different problems in some way, and it's not necessarily the situation or your event that got you down, that made you upset, but it's how you perceive it and it's how you handle it. The main message is that you're not the only one going through these problems and ideas and these situations, but you can verbalize them and you can cope with them in a healthy way to get you through that. And that's basically what I want kids to understand. That's something that I didn't know. I didn't know that there were other people going through the same type of issues, the same type of problems, that there would ever be anyone else that would have suicidal thoughts. I wish I did speak up about my emotions, about my feelings, because I could have heard someone else say, well, I go through those struggles as well. I could have heard someone else saying, I have stress, I have anxiety, I had those thoughts at one point. So in a way, I wish I would have verbalized that.
That wraps up the content for Competency 7. For Competency 7, there is one journal activity for you to complete. What I would like you to do is to choose one of the mental illness or mental health concerns that was discussed during this video and answer the following questions. What symptoms could you observe while the student is at school for this mental health concern? What would you say to a student if you were concerned they had one of these mental illnesses? And number 3, with whom would you share your concerns? The answers to those questions can be put in the journal activity form that is included in the accompanying resources found on the same web page as this video link was. There are many resources available for all the different mental illness and mental health concerns that we discussed today, as well as others. Here are just a couple of resources, and these links are also available in the accompanying resources where you found the journal activity form and the link to this video. For any questions regarding the content of this video, please contact myself or Dee Blanchard with the contact information listed here. If you have any questions regarding the course or recertification questions, please contact Sarah Schiller or Glenda Succo. Their contact information is listed here as well. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you in April at the live Zoom.